On this like agent thing, there's one question I have in my head that's like around the orchestration layer. Like I chat with a lot of listeners and folks that work in GTM and in ops, and there's like everyone is keeping tabs on this like race for this orchestration layer, and a lot of folks are confused about where this is going. And I'm curious to get your take on this. Like every Martech vendor is integrating agent capabilities inside of their tooling, whether they're connecting directly to OpenAI or recalibrating like their own value props and trying to build something homegrown. Like, what advice do you have for Martech or systems pros that are thinking of this future or maybe even like current reality for a lot of folks where there's a ton of complexity exploding with AI agents from different vendors with their own orchestration logic. Like some folks have said, we're almost going to become like AI referees where we need to decide to turn it on in this tool, turn it off in that tool. All for customer success, we'll use this tool. Like maybe chat about like how do we work in an enterprise environment when every tool in your Martech stack is saying like turn on the AI for this tool.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll say, initially that it ultimately will come down to what you want to do. But the guidance that I think I would offer this audience is I would say that this game isn't all that different than what we've been doing for the last 10 years on trying to get these technologies to talk to each other,
Hmm.
right? And it's about coordination, right? If I've got and let's just use the timeless example of marketing automation and CRM, right? Anyone who's listening to this podcast has probably done any number of integrations with any number of maps and any number of CRMs, and we can probably all have a horror story or several of trying to get those two to talk to each other, right? But if you do take the right amount of time and understand the timing and order of operations between the two, right? Like, obviously my career has been pretty heavily with Salesforce, right? That's the CRM I've used most often. Salesforce has a lot of things about it that are pretty um, routine, if you will, right? Between the way that it runs its processing queue to the amount of volume it'll handle at any given time, right? And in order to deploy Salesforce at scale, you need to know those things like the back of your hand, right? Because otherwise, you might start building a solution, whether it's declarative or custom developed, that isn't really compatible with the way the core system runs, right? So I would say that there's really not a lot of apprehension that's warranted to say, like, don't turn on the AI or don't use that vendor's orchestration layer, but you need to understand it intimately because at the end of the day, what you're doing as a technologist is you are playing translator between vendor A and vendor B and the agents or orchestration layers within them. Now, there's always going to be space for maybe some sort of master orchestration layer that's then maybe essentially doing that job for you eventually, right? But you can't teach something to do something if you don't know how to do it yourself. So I would
Yep.
just say that you've got to know how these layers are and agentic workflows are operating at a very intimate level.
And because what I'm seeing out in the market now is people are using AI and companies are using AI just for the sake of it. It's just like, oh, you know, we should use AI, but we're not really sure what we're going to use it for. But we should use it. Otherwise, we're going to like either miss out or something like that. And so often, um, the core foundations of, you know, sales and marketing plays, they're for many companies, they're just not that good, and they're missing some of these critical things. And that's what we really should be using AI for. Like what you're saying, the data organization, the infrastructure, making sure everything's formatted correctly so that we can run when we need to. But I think that, in so many places, and I get approached by founders all the time, and they're like, "Hey, can you let me show you this new AI tool?" And it's for something that like I didn't even want to do in the first place,
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of the theme that I'm kind of hearing is like, you're harping on like, let's get all of this, orchestration layer correctly. Let's get the data correct so that we can do things. But it seems like companies are just trying to, maybe sprint before they can even crawl. You know what I mean? Is that kind of?
I think there's a lot of validity to that premise. I'll offer, I think, what is an apt analogy. It's not a perfect one to one, but it's a good example of something that we probably. I'm gonna say it in a moment, and anyone listening is gonna be like, might even roll their eyes for a moment. But I'm gonna compare the future and the right way to approach agentic workflows to lead scoring,
Mm.
and
Hmm.
specifically how you operationalize lead scoring. So I'll tell a quick story. Years ago, I'm at a sales kickoff, early stage company, one of those ones where I could do ops and tech at the same time, right? And I'm on stage at the kickoff unveiling our first ever lead score. Because we were that early stage. We hadn't had one yet. We hadn't needed one, right? And I got several questions during that session of like, why do I even need this? Right? I know what a good lead is. And I'm like, you do know what a good lead is, which is why we met with you and why you gave us all this great insight to inform this lead score. But tell me real quickly again, what do you do to determine what a good lead is, right? And of course, the seller, very good at what they do, is like, well, I check A and B and C and D. And I'm like, great. Well, the lead score did that. It outputted a score based on A, B, C, and D and the values that we found there. And now you have a list from highest to lowest. So I can have you spending more of your time at the top of this list, working your way down, right? That's the same approach to the agentic workflow. It's like, hey, let's replace something that I do today as a human that frankly I do automatically or I
Yep.
do somewhat subconsciously, right?
Mhm.
Because if I do that correctly and do it at scale with an agentic approach, then now think about all of the time that I am freeing up for myself, my colleagues, my operations, my field team. That's where the unlock is, in my opinion. Because and people who are much smarter than me speak to this in really wonderful ways. But I think that the future of AI is really about unlocking new levels of human creativity. I think that is the real promise of what we are bringing with this technology.
Very cool. Great analogy. I think anyone listening probably has played a role in lead scoring. It was one of like my earliest intros into sales management
Same.
and sales process between like map and CRMs there.